everyone, this is Latino Gamer, bringing you my review of Final Fantasy X by Square Enix. Final Fantasy X was the first in Square's long-running series of role-playing games to debut on Sony's PlayStation 2, and thus introduced several innovations, including voice acting and DVD-quality cutscenes. For a game that came out so early in the console's life, it features some truly beautiful music and graphics, and is the game that made me fall in love with my PlayStation 2. You begin your journey in Zanarkand, a futuristic town obsessed with the sport of blitzball, which is essentially an underwater cross between soccer and rugby. Like his father before him, Tidus is the star player of Zanarkand's Abes. The major threat in this world is a Godzilla-like creature.
We called it Sin.
Who shows up and obliterates town after town. Of course, Sin shows up during one of Tidus' blitzball games and trashes Zanarkand. He finds Auron, who hands him his late father's sword.
Take it. A gift from Jet.
My old man?
This is a very original scene, unlike anything we've seen before.
Your father's lightsaber. This is the weapon of a Jedi Knight. Not as clumsy or random as a blaster.
Tidus and Auron fight off creatures known as Sin Spawn, monsters ejected from Sin's flesh. This serves as your first tutorial, introducing you to the basic combat mechanics as well as the use of overdrives, which are this game's limit breaks. Admittedly, this game was very creative with handling their overdrives. To perform Tidus' overdrive at full force, you need to stop a timer at the right moment, while Auron needs you to quickly press a string of button commands. Once the obligatory introductory disaster is done, Tidus finds himself on a pirate ship with a group of people known as the Albed, who suffer from a syndrome known as fantastic racism. With Auron nowhere in sight, Tidus' only friend is the only English-speaking Albed, Riku. After yet another disaster, Tidus wakes up on Besaid Island. Wakka is the coach and captain of the Besaid Aurochs, the team with the most laughably bad losing streak on the planet of Spira. Needless to say, when Wakka sees Tidus' moves, he immediately wants to recruit him. On Besaid Island, Tidus meets the rest of the cast of characters and we find out about the planet's belief system. Sin is the incarnation of people's sins in the world and is thus eternal until humankind can atone for their trespasses. Summoners are trained in the temples to summon Aeons, the incarnations of spirits known as the Faith. When Sin appears, summoners must begin a worldwide pilgrimage to each temple and attain each summon to combat their way to Sin. Once Sin is defeated, the world will be at peace for 10 years, until Sin is reborn and the summoners of the world must begin their pilgrimage anew. Yuna is a young summoner living on Besaid Island, who is about to begin her own pilgrimage to defeat Sin, as her father did 10 years previously. Each in-game temple serves as a puzzle for you to solve before attaining the new Aeon. For protection on their journey, summoners are allowed to be accompanied by any number of people serving as their guardians. After introducing him to Yuna's other guardians, the mage Lulu and Kimari of the Ronso warrior tribe, Wakka invites Tidus along for the journey, so he may play with the Aurochs at the worldwide blitzball tournament. Tidus, infatuated with Yuna, of course agrees to come along and help protect her, setting up the obvious love story. After all, this is a Final Fantasy game. The combat is completely turn-based, replacing the active time battle system used in the previous Final Fantasies. While you eventually have a total of 7 characters, only 3 of them can be in the battle at a time. Fortunately, you're allowed to swap characters in and out on the fly. On their turn, one of your characters can tag out with another character not currently in the battle. The bar on the side of the battle display shows the sequence of upcoming turns, including your own characters as well as your opponents. When selecting an action, this bar will show you whether taking that action will delay your next turn or even delay your target's next turn, allowing for a lot of strategy. Characters receive experience as they would in any RPG, but rather than automatically attaining higher levels which carry with them heightened statistics, your characters will receive sphere levels, the basis of this game's unique character development system, the sphere grid. You can enter the sphere grid from the menu. This grid contains over 100 interlocking nodes containing skills, spells, abilities, and stat boosts. Each character sits at a different starting point. As they move along the grid, you can use various spheres to activate the nodes on the grid, which grants the given ability or stat boost to that character. Every character is allowed to activate each node once. While the individual characters don't have job classes per se, they are initially limited to their section of the sphere grid. Like most male leads, Tidus is the fast swordsman. He can also learn haste, which speeds up your characters, and slow, which slows down your opponents, giving you more turns to work with. These become some of the most useful spells you can learn. Lulu is your black mage with the most offensive magic. Yuna, besides being your summoner, is also your white mage with the most defensive magic. Wakka's skills involve attacking the enemy and inflicting them with various status abnormalities. When Auron returns to your party, he will likely be your strongest character. His swords and abilities allow him to hurt armored enemies and cut opponents' attributes in half. Rico is also eventually reintroduced as your thief, with the ability to attain lots of different items by stealing them from your opponents. Kimari Ronso doesn't begin with much besides the Lancet ability, which drains some health and magic from an opponent. Like everyone else, he'll have to acquire some key spheres to unlock other sections of the sphere grid, allowing you to send them down any path you choose. Also, even though the other characters can attain the Lancet ability as well, only when Kimari uses it does it grant the power to learn a new skill from certain opponents. These skills, called Ronso Rages, are Kimari's overdrives. When Kimari attains one for the first time, his overdrive gauge is immediately filled, allowing him to try out the ability right away. Once Kimari has these rages in his repertoire, he can perform them whenever he has a full overdrive gauge. Wakka's overdrives involve stopping 3 slots to determine the effect. Lulu's overdrive is Fury, which allows her to perform any black magic spell she knows multiple times by rotating the right analog stick. When Riku's overdrive gauge is full, she can choose 2 items to mix for various different effects. Final Fantasies up to this point had summons that simply acted as more advanced spells. This was the first time when summoning a creature literally meant bringing a new character into the battle in place of your standard characters. On Besaid, you see Yuna attain her first Aeon, Valifor. When Yuna brings Valifor into battle, your 3 characters stell back while Valifor takes on the monster single-handedly. Every Aeon has their own overdrive gauge, which allows them to perform their unique, powerful abilities when full. Yuna doesn't have an overdrive of her own. Instead, a full overdrive gauge allows her to Grand Summon, which brings in one of her Aeons already equipped with a full gauge. Final Fantasy X is one of the few games I continually keep multiple save files for, simply because some of the boss battles are a lot of fun to come back to and play over and over again. This is also easily the game I have spent the most time playing, with my latest save file currently clocked in at well over 100 hours. I loved attaining the different Aeons in this game and watching their spectacular attacks. This is the kind of cinematography I'd love to see from a core Pokemon title. The sphere grid might confuse some people at first, but once you get used to it, you begin to look forward to acquiring that next spell or ability. Blitzball turns out to be one of the most involved and fun to play minigames I've ever seen in an RPG. Make sure you recruit Riku's brother as soon as you can. If you're a fan of Pokemon or other turn-based RPGs, you love dungeon crawlers and collecting a lot of items to attain lots of secret weapons and abilities, or you just like a good story you can play through at your leisure, I highly recommend Final Fantasy X. You can easily get a good 40 hours from the main game, so you probably shouldn't rent it unless you're prepared for some long nights. At a current price of about $20, this game will give RPG fans hours upon hours of game time per dollar, so I recommend buying the game to play at your own pace. If you plan on conquering the Monster Arena, a side quest that has you travel the planet to capture fiends and fight monsters that are much more challenging than the end boss, be prepared to put in the long hours. However, if you've tried different RPGs in the past and have never been a fan, the flashy graphics probably won't be enough to change your mind, and this will likely feel like just another slow game. Try it out if you get a chance, but don't spend your money if you're the type of gamer who has always hated RPG's representation of real-time combat as something where opponents take turns performing actions. If you're looking for a game that's all about action and gameplay, Final Fantasy X will probably feel a bit slow to you. Those of you who are willing to play it all the way through and are capable of fully immersing themselves in a good story will be rewarded with some touching and emotional scenes.
I am a summoner, my lord, like my father before me.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
To an overarching story dealing with heritage, manhood, loyalty, and keeping your faith despite corruption in the church. I continue to hold this game as a prime example of video games as an art form and medium for telling a story that at the time I hadn't seen since Metal Gear Solid. Final Fantasy X was so successful, it was followed up by a direct sequel, at the time an unprecedented move for the franchise. I hope you'll join me next time as I take a look at the game most people probably thought of as either a bold move or a shallow act of fan service. Final Fantasy X-2. Thank you for listening, and happy gaming.